Sometimes he would say, "You're my priest." So I think he was a little confused, but what can I say? So remain seated, and we're going to pray. Let us pray. O God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant true rest upon the wings of divine presence in the exalted spheres of the holy and pure, who shine as the resplendence of the firmament to the soul of Howard Safir, who has gone to his eternal reward. May his place of rest be in your merciful hands and arms. Therefore, may the all-merciful one shelter him with the cover of his wings forever and bind his soul in the bond of life. The Lord is his heritage. May he rest in his resting place in peace. And let us all say, Amen.
Thank you, Monsignor Romano. Normally I'd say please be seated, but since we're seated, thank you, Monsignor. We're here to celebrate the life of the former police commissioner, former fire commissioner, former assistant director of the DEA, and former associate director of the U.S. Marshals Service. So the best way we thought of to do that was to hear from the people that knew Commissioner Safir the best. So we're going to bring up people that he worked with and knew him personally. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the day, the former Drug Enforcement Agency Special Agent in charge of the New York Division, Lou Rice.
So to Carol, Jennifer, and Adam, and to our colleagues in the audience, this is a day of celebration of a true giant in public service. When you look at all those emblems back there, Howard just didn't show up. He was a leader in all those organizations, and somebody that I was fortunate to learn about when I began my career with DEA. Howard spent 13 years with the Drug Enforcement Administration, starting in 1965 and moving on in 1978. And during that time, he distinguished himself as an undercover operative, conducting investigations all over the country and doing an outstanding job with that and traveling internationally. In 1973, when DEA was formally established in July, Howard was a leader on the West Coast in California at 30 years of age, which is totally unusual back then and even now. But it just goes to show you his leadership. And when you think about Howard, I think about somebody that is committed, dependable, somebody if you had to work with or pick a team, you'd want Howard on your team because he would make sure that whatever was done was going to be done right. He had the uncanny ability to block out the noise, block out the naysayers, and focus solely on the task and bring people along with him. And that's how I remember Howard. And I did have an occasion to work with him in 1997 when I came back to New York as the special agent in charge, and Howard was the police commissioner for this great city in New York. And we had an international money laundering investigation, 34th Street, 10th Avenue, about 8 o'clock at night, $250,000 in cash that we were taking in from the drug dealers, so we considered it low risk because we were getting the money to launder on behalf of the drug cartels. However, there was another group in Queens following these individuals around all day, and when we met at the McDonald's, they decided to launch and take the money. And it was a shootout. Several people were killed. Agent was shot, and about 5 or 6 people got away. And you could imagine, you know, I'm at the NYPD now. My dad was a proud detective in the NYPD, spent most of his time at 2-5. But the NYPD has a homicide in the borough of Manhattan. They're focused like a laser to find out who these people are. We had an international drug investigation, and this was one overt act in this international drug organization. So we were trying to continue the organization. So I guess to put it mildly, there was a little bit of tension between the feds and the city on who's going to interview these people and the cadence. Call to Howard, who understood the significance of our international investigation and understood also that the NYPD detectives had a responsibility to find out who's committing a murder in their city, and we were able to resolve this in everybody's satisfaction. The detectives got a chance to interview these people, and we could help them in the interview because we knew a lot about this case, and we also were able to go on with the investigation and not indicate to the general public and definitely to the crooks that they were under federal surveillance. But that all happened with Howard. And I have to say that's unusual because there is tension sometimes, but you look for the greater good. And that was Howard saying, hey, everybody can get a little piece of this, but we need to continue this investigation on. And then when I went into the private sector, we had a task, and I say, you know a lot of people as you move around the city and move around the country and move around the world, but when the target is on your back and it's your responsibility to get certain things done, there's a small number of people you're going to go to that you know they're going to dot the I's and cross the T's. And we had a significant task to accomplish in the company, and the first person I went to was Howard. And Howard made sure that things were done right, okay? Dot the I's, cross the T's, and was done to perfection. And that's the kind of man that I know Howard Safir. Dot the I's, cross the T's. You have him on your side, you have a tiger on your side. He's going to make sure things are done right. And not going to sway to politics or pressure or what's good to be done now, but maybe long term is not the right thing to do. He had the strong character to get it done right. And I say we need more leaders like that, definitely in the city, definitely in this country, and definitely in this world. So it's a blessing for me and a celebration to say that I knew Howard Safir and he was a friend. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Rice. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, former U.S. Marshal Gene Corcoran.
Good morning. It's a privilege to be here today and represent some of Howard's many friends and colleagues, and to share some comments on his legendary career with the United States Marshals Service. I would learn much about Howard's leadership during my time with the Marshals, and I'll share a few personal comments of those he led and worked closely with during that time, people whose lives he touched and careers that he changed. Just to jump back briefly, my first contact with Howard was in 1996 when I found myself standing on a deck out at Coast Guard Mauritius, a TWA flight taking off out of Kennedy Airport, exploded in midair. And we were setting up the initial command post. And I remember one of the tasks where the scuba divers for the state police were being flown in. And I remember the team leader coming up to me saying, "Where are our boats? You know, what are we diving off of?" And I didn't have an answer. Shortly after that, he came back to me. He said, "We're taken care of. You don't have to worry about that." NYPD Harbor just showed up. We trained with them. We've dove with them. And for the next at least 4 months, state police divers drove off of NYPD launches. I just came to learn this recently because I called up Jim McMahon, who was the superintendent of state police, when I was asked to speak this morning, because Jim and Howard became good friends over the years. And he said, "Yeah, that was Howard Safir. He sent the harbor out. He knew we'd need him." And I would learn that was one of his personality traits that was key, which you'll hear about, I'm sure, all day today. Looking out for those under his command, making sure that they had the resources needed to complete a task. So I did call Jim, and Jim's fighting some health issues too. And when I mentioned Howard, his first comment was, "Gene, he would call me every couple of months just to see how I was feeling." So obviously compassion, too, is a word you'll hear a lot. That was another hallmark of Howard Safir. Jim also recounted a short story. He said in the early days he knew that there needed to be better connectivity between the state police and the NYPD. So he drove down and he sat with Howard in the PC's office and he pled his case. And, there was so much going on and often involved the mayor's office and the governor's office, sensitive issues. And he said when he was done, Howard didn't say anything. He just turned to Richie Shearer, who was in the office, and said, "Make it happen." And within weeks, the state police lieutenant was sitting in the chief of department's office, and he's still there today. And many sensitive issues have been handled over the years. And I think that speaks volumes to the type of leadership that Howard had. Howard moved on. I moved on to the Marshals Service, and there learned much more about Howard Safir, about the trail he blazed that led him to the NYPD, following his service with the United States Marine Corps and his path through the Bureau of Narcotics and DEA. He achieved the position of Assistant Director. It was then that Howard was tapped by the Attorney General to be the Chief of the Witness Security Division at the Marshals Service. Former Director Stan Morris said he first met Howard during the aftermath of the assassination attempt on President Reagan. Director Morris said he was immediately impressed by Howard's cool, professional, and natural leadership presence. He said it was breathtaking to relate how Howard changed the Marshals Service in so many ways. Director Morris offered that the world knows the Marshals as the premier fugitive investigators because Howard was willing to not only lead, but to take risks. As a result, a new breed of marshals was recruited with record numbers of women and minorities. Director Morris closed by saying that when he had last met Howard, Howard told him that he had many jobs, but the best and most rewarding were the years that they had worked together in the Marshal Service. Although the Marshals is a storied agency with a history dating back to 1789, when George Washington appointed the first Marshal, when Howard Safir arrived, the Marshal Service was being challenged. Al Matney, a colleague of Howard's for 45 years, was there in 1978 when Howard came to reorganize and address the problems. Al said the media was highly critical of the program and Congress was holding hearings on it. Al stated that Howard initiated significant changes and the program underwent a remarkable transformation in a short period of time. Howard had secure safe sites constructed across the country and state-of-the-art equipment was obtained. He said Howard reinstated a pride with the witness security staff and that he was the architect of the U.S. Marshals Service, who brought the agency to where it stands today. He closed by saying Howard was a proud American who placed God, country, and family above all other things. The WITSEC program became the envy of other countries around the world, as well as our own intelligence community. The ability to protect vulnerable witnesses played a pivotal role in dismantling several high-profile criminal organizations and organized crime families. Within a few years, Howard was again elevated to the position of Associate Director overseeing all USMS operations. He continued to improve security of the courts and the fugitive apprehension mission. Today, federal, state, and local partners working together in USMS-led regional fugitive task force span the country and arrest over 300 wanted felons on any given day. Stacia Hilton, the former director of the Marshals Service, told me that one of the most defining traits of Howard's leadership was his unwavering commitment to those under his command. No matter how intense the operation or dire the situation, Howard had a relentless drive to ensure that his team had the resources and support they needed. Stacia said that as she took on the role of director, facing a myriad of challenges that came with the position, it was Howard's fearlessness she often thought of. Director Hilton stated that he was bold, innovative, and had an uncanny ability to take calculated risk at precisely the right time and for the right reason. Stacia told me that in the midst of difficult decisions, she would pause and think, what would Howard do? And she noted that after his public career, he remained anchored to the institutions that shaped him. He took on pivotal roles in championing the establishment of the U.S. Marshals Museum and offered unwavering support to the DEA Education Foundation. when some people heard I was going to speak today, I got so many letters and notes about Howard Safir that, you know, we would be here all day. But they all said, touched on many of the things I did, and you'll hear. I think I'll just close with a note I received from Nancy McGillivray, retired supervisory inspector from the District of Massachusetts. Nancy said Howard's vision as to where the U.S. Marshals should be on the world stage became reality by empowering others to share in that vision. He never let an opportunity pass by, and most often sought out the challenges. He was compassionate, a good leader, a great listener, and one of a kind. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Corcoran. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the former Fire Commissioner of the City of New York, the Honorable Thomas Von Essen.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Carol, and to your family for, for asking me to say a few words. I consider it a real honor, because I had so much respect and high regard for Howard. I realized why he was so secretive after listening to the other speakers. This place is full of cops and, you know, people who have a lot of secrets. He came to the fire department. There were no secrets. The fire department was like a soap opera. So there are no secrets over there. And he always, we always had fun with him, joking about that. You know, he always had something behind that he held back from us. But he gave us so much that we all really appreciated. And to my friends in blue that are here, I'm going to say a lot of bad things about the fire department, but it's old news. It's 29 years old, so there's no material for you guys to be using against FDNY at this present time. All right? I'm stipulating old news. 29 years old, actually. It's really difficult to tell you how terrific Howard was as a fire commissioner without telling you how bad we were when he arrived. Citizens of New York City loved the fire department, but had no idea of the lack of support we had received for so many years and the lack of good leadership that we were in desperate need of. We had spent many years, probably since 1965 till 1980, what we called our war years, where we had more fires than any time in the history of the department, even till today. And also we watched the city deteriorate. And not just us, but all of the city agencies didn't get the support that they needed. And the city was really in a lot of trouble when the Giuliani administration arrived. Politics, economy, blame it on who you want. But everybody had an opinion of it. But the fact is, that's what we dealt with. Howard's managerial style was easily identifiable from his track record in government. He was not about slow, small, unnoticeable increments of change. In a few weeks of searching for a new headquarters, the fire department was on a 13-month path to its first new building at Metrotech. Within weeks of a fire we had on Watt Street that took the lives of 3 firefighters, Howard got the funding from Mayor Giuliani for protective clothing, which led to a 70% reduction in our burns. He instituted new training and back to basics. He brought in people who told us, like the air pilots, of a zero-tolerance policy for safety. He created and funded for programs to renovate all of our firehouses. After a brief investigation, he discovered that the department had limited resources in paper products. He got everybody an account at Staples so we could at least know what was going on. When Howard learned that it took a week or more to get a fire report from a firehouse, every firehouse got a technological miracle called a fax machine. Howard and I each had a hand in each other becoming fire commissioner. Of course, Howard's hand was much bigger than mine. Howard's hand was much bigger than almost all the guys in this room, probably. He had big hands, big man. After Mayor Giuliani was elected, I was invited to Deputy Mayor Mastro's office. And he said to me, I was the president of the Firefighters Union. We had been very supportive. We had helped him a lot get elected. And he said, Deputy Mayor Mastro said, we'd like your input. We'd like to give you a fire commissioner that you're happy with. And we have this chief so-and-so that we're going to do. And I said, oh my God. I said, he's a disaster. I said, you're asking me. I don't want that guy. So I said, he's been there before. He's a great fire officer, nice man, horrible leader, not what the fire department needs. Well, what do you think? I said, well, first I'd like to see a guy who was a friend of the mayor. From my experience, I had spent like 10 years in a union, so I could see how effective it was when everybody hated each other. It doesn't work. So I asked for a friend of the mayor and also someone who understood big things and not just, small-minded. Well, a month later, Howard Safir arrived. It was like, it was as though it was a dream come true for me, because I could see right away that he was an agent of change, and we certainly needed it. When Howard left the fire department to become police commissioner, Mayor Giuliani asked his advice on who should be fire commissioner, and he said, the union guy is the best guy over there. And the stories I hear from other people on the staff saying, well, of course you can't do the union guy. And then Giuliani, of course, did the union guy. But it was only because of Howard I had the greatest job in the world, coming from trying to prove safety in a union to being able to institute programs that he had started at the fire department. You can imagine how popular that decision was with all the fire chiefs. They really loved me. Still today, it's gratifying. I had the privilege and honor to work with him for 2 years as UFA president. He showed me from a distance, and everyone on his team up close, how the FDNY could and should be led. He showed us all that FDNY was not limited like we thought we were. The Safir-Giuliani combination took FDNY out of the dark ages. In 2 years, more positive change was instituted in safety and operations than in 20 years before that. This past summer, I texted him a picture of him testifying in front of the city council. And you could see by his face, you could always read his face. He hated talking to those characters at the city council. And I can imagine if he had to do it today, because I think the city council has only gotten worse. I didn't hear back from him with any comments about my comments about the picture, and I realized after talking to Adam and Joe Dunn that he had was going through a rough time during the summer. So I understood later why I never heard back from him. I don't think anything showed how dumb politics was and still is than his efforts to remove the alarm boxes, with tremendous effort, without success. They're still on the street, falling apart, almost never used, and we've wasted untold millions in 25 years maintaining them. But that's how he was. He took on projects, and if unsuccessful, he just moved on to the next one. But it didn't scare him or detain him from the effort. The operational changes and safety improvements he began are themselves a great legacy. What I think is even more important is what he left to his team, which for the most part became my team for almost 6 years. He showed us how to manage and how to lead, to question, to ask why, and to not accept an answer that, well, we've always done it that way, which you run into a lot in civil service. He was direct, he was demanding, professional. He embodied and expected the best of public servants. He was a bold visionary. He saw what the future could be, and he did his part to make it so. He taught us that, and we tried to carry on his vision. He was one of a kind, but I know he inspired others to serve with courage and conviction. I'm proud to be one of those people that was inspired by him to serve with courage and conviction. So I thank you, Howard, and rest in peace knowing that you earned a job well done from so many great public servants that you worked with and inspired over the years. And thank you, Carol and your family.
And thank you, Commissioner Von Essen. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the former First Deputy Commissioner of the New York City Police Department, Joseph Dunn.
Thank you. Carol, Adam, Jennifer, thanks so much for inviting me here today to say some words about my boss and my friend, Howard Safir. You know, I could talk here for hours about his accomplishments, particularly in the NYPD, but I know our time is limited, and I want to say mostly how Howard impressed me, about how I met Howard, what became of the boss, and how he transcended into my friend for this past almost 25 years. I first met Commissioner Safir in April of 1996, shortly after Mayor Giuliani accepted the resignation of the then Police Commissioner Bill Bratton and announced that Howard Safir, the fire commissioner, who knew, was his choice to be the 39th New York City Police Commissioner. While Bratton announced his resignation on the 26th, he wouldn't be leaving until the 15th of April. So they set Howard up in a transition office a couple of blocks from City Hall. And they gave him tons and tons of briefing materials to review. One of the briefings had to do with a major crime-fighting initiative just getting underway in Brooklyn North that required his approval to continue. I was the deputy chief in charge of that operation, and so sometime around April 10th, he summoned me to the transition office, and we met face-to-face for the first time. I didn't know what to expect. The night before, I slept very little, did all the studying I could because I figured he'd quiz me about this program and I better have it nailed down. I knew the plan was sound and I hoped he'd agree. So I met him, alone, just he and I. My first impression? Definitely not a warm and fuzzy guy. He had a steely look and wasted little time on small talk. In fact, if you want to call, hello, sit down, who are you, small talk, that was the extent of that. He got right to the point, and he had reviewed the operational plans for the initiative and would approve us moving forward. He asked a few questions and then concluded the 10-minute meeting. The last thing he told me when I was leaving the room was, hey, if I find the plan's not working, I'll fire you and find someone who'll make it work. Good luck. I said, fair enough. I didn't mean it. So I walked back to One PP here, and lots of stuff was swimming in my mind. I'm saying, did he say he was going to fire me? I thought, well, he can't fire me. I'm civil service protected. He could replace me, but that's not going to happen because it's a great plan and it's going to work. So I point that out because the Howard Safir I came to know was more complicated than the direct, no-holds-barred man I met in April of 1996. Yes, he was straightforward, but also honest, supportive, loyal, hardworking, collaborative, smart, and generous. In short, a great leader and a great man. He came to love the NYPD and understood the difficulties of everyday police life, the dangers faced by the rank and file, and their need to be fully supported when they were right. He listened carefully to community leaders who complained about the disconnect that existed between the police, especially in the minority communities, and he worked tirelessly to bring them together. He selected commanders who were known and respected for their community outreach and involvement, often mentoring them even after they left the NYPD. Through his courtesy, professionalism, and respect program, CPR for short, police training was improved, civilian complaints dropped, and fewer police-involved shootings were recorded. By the way, 23 years after leaving the NYPD, you can still see the CPR emblem emblazoned on all of the police cars in New York City. That's a nice tribute to Howard, all these years later. He emphasized his support for CPI by showing no tolerance for police misconduct. He often increased penalties over and above those recommended by the department advocate when he felt the misconduct called for more severe punishment. At the same time, he firmly supported officers when their actions were justified even in the face of public and relentless press criticism. Crime was reduced to lows the city hadn't seen in decades during his almost 4.5 years tenure as the PC. Commissioner Safir supported vigorous drug crime enforcement and saw it as a key to any successful crime reduction strategy. With years of experience fighting the scourge of drugs with the DEA, Commissioner Safir knew full well that drug use and addiction fueled the crime epidemic, affected largely deplored communities, and it needed to be stopped. Much of the gang violence, the shooting, murders, robberies, and assaults all had drug nexus. He knew attacking the drug problem by identifying and dismantling the gangs that controlled the drug trade would lower crime and return the public spaces to our communities. The narcotics division grew by thousands of officers who were deployed to attack the problem. The various initiatives worked, and crime began to freefall, and it continued even after he left. On the public housing front, he saw that the program for installation of the CCTV cameras in the public housing development was stalled. He didn't want to hear about that. He directed that a concerted effort be undertaken to speed up the installation process, going so far as to authorize use of department resources to assist in trenching and installation of cable, cameras, and monitoring stations wherever the New York City Housing Authority couldn't do it or wouldn't do it. Of course, he and the department came under renewed criticism from the civil libertarians who had objected early on when the CCTV program was first initiated. The commissioner explained that cameras monitoring the public space in public housing developments afforded the 600,000 people living in public housing the same protection that wealthier New York tenants had been enjoying for years. A survey of public housing tenants was conducted, and they overwhelmingly supported the CCTV initiative and more or less told the ACLU to beat sand. During his tenure, Commissioner Safir faced two serious health issues. In March of '96, he underwent double bypass surgery and in true grit style appeared with the NYPD as they marched up Fifth Avenue on St. Patrick's Day, 10 days after the surgery. While he wanted to walk a few blocks up the avenue, cooler heads prevailed, and he was thrown into a golf cart and went up the avenue on that. In May of 2000, he announced he had prostate cancer that was caught early and was being dealt with. He faced these health issues in his typical steadfast manner and remained focused on doing his job to the best of his ability. In August of 2000, I was the chief of department, the third and final promotion given to me by Howard. He called me into his office and told me in confidence he was announcing his retirement. He told me he would recommend me to the police commissioner as his successor and the next police commissioner if I wanted the job. Oh yeah, I wanted the job. And he recommended me to the mayor. And the mayor chose someone else. I will never forget that Howard thought me worthy enough to succeed him as police commissioner. I cherish the memory and will be eternally grateful for the honor. Commissioner Safir remained in the public eye long after his retirement as PC. He appeared as a commentator on Fox News and wrote articles and op-ed pieces for newspapers and magazines. He always stuck up for the cops, attacking police bashers and those politicians looking to defund police departments or supporting laws that would make policing ineffective. While he was PC, we would occasionally see each other at after-work events with wives in tow. My wife Barbara and Howard's wife Carol became friendly. After his retirement, our friendship with the Safirs continued to develop. Over the years, we became closer to the Safirs, attending many dinners together, celebrating birthdays, enjoying weekends at Easton, and boating on the Chesapeake. They were always gracious hosts, full of energy and fun to be with. Carol and Howard loved to travel. They were always on their way someplace or just coming back from someplace. Whether it be a cruise, a trip to Europe, to Ireland where they owned a home, to Park City where they skied, to Palm Springs where they spent some time in winter, to Easton for some sailing, to Ocean City, Maryland just for the beach, and to Annapolis just to be home. Oh, yeah, and he also kept an apartment here in New York City for some 20 years after he left the department. Carol, the love of Howard's life, managed the details of this hectic, exciting life and would keep friends up to date on their travels, including details of a cross-country automobile trip they took in his little red Corvette. Howard loved work and traveled but his passion was his family, and being with them meant the world to him. His son Adam and daughter Jennifer and their grandkids, Audrey, Hudson, Kara, and Alexander, were always a topic of conversation. The usually quiet Howard became animated and excited when telling stories about the family. His favorite trips and vacations were the ones he spent with his kids and grandkids. After Howard's funeral service in Annapolis, there was a repast at a local restaurant. Several of Howard's grandchildren spoke informally about their granddad with heartwarming anecdotes and unreserved love. Finally, Howard was a huge fan of Jimmy Buffett. Famous for his hit song Margaritaville, Howard claimed to know all of Jimmy Buffett's songs and went to his concert. I'm not so sure about that, but who's going to call him a liar? Jimmy died a few days before Howard. Wouldn't it be grand if Howard is up there somewhere with Jimmy, hot on the trail searching for that lost shaker of salt? I bet he finds it. So, cheers to Howard for a life well lived. And thank you for your service to our country, to New York City, and to our beloved police department. Thank you. Thanks, Luke.
Thank you, Commissioner Dunn. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now my honor to introduce Howard Safir's son, Mr. Adam Safir.
The family would just like to express our gratitude to the NYPD, to the ceremonial unit led by Lieutenant Conway. My father loved law enforcement. He loved service. He loved the people. He loved the passion. And he managed to have a family and be there for us at all times. The words you heard tonight, this evening, are just remarkable and reflective of my father, the man he was. Thank you so much to Lou, to Gene, to Commissioner Von Essen, to First Deputy Dunn. We're just honored by your words and very moved by them. I'll keep it brief. The Police Foundation has been very generous with sandwiches, and as Father Romano would say, mangiamo.
Thank you, Adam. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I'm going to ask everyone to please rise and join us in the singing of God Bless America, led again by Police Officer Taylor Cannon.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans wide with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home.
Thank you, Officer Cannon. I'm going to ask everyone to please remain standing as we would like to pay, the police department would like to pay their final respects to our former police commissioner. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, this concludes the ceremony portion of today's celebration of life. Lunch is being served by compliments of the Police Foundation, and on behalf of the Safir family, I'd like to thank everyone for attending and celebrating the amazing life of Howard Safir. But before we conclude, I would like to invite the Safir family up on the stage, and then the members of the police department, fire department, marshals, and everyone else in attendance. We'd like to get a group photo to remember this day.